The emperor is the most powerful man in the empire, but his throne came with baggage, the mistakes of his predecessor. He has a seemingly impossible task, setting a new path. But what if the most powerful thing about him isn't what he does, but what he refuses to become? To understand that, we have to look at the man that ruled before him. The previous emperor is a tragic, troubled character. The show gives us a glimpse into his past, but also leaves the audience with a lot of unanswered questions. For example, it is obvious that he had a severe fear of women, but we are not shown whether this is a product of trauma, disability, or both. He was an emperor in name only. The person that really ruled the nation was the empress regnant. Why? He couldn't lead. As the youngest of many brothers, he was never meant to rule anyway. His mother had to step in to train him, but it seems like she used very rigid and extreme measures, which left him more fearful and incapable, and so she filled in the gap. As far as the series goes, his relationship with his mother is unclear. She seemed overprotective in the aspect of not allowing the nation to see him as weak or incapable by filling in for him, but his fear of women extends to her as well. If you've watched the show, then you know about the previous emperor's tastes. But as I look back on this, I think his mother played a serious role in all of it. His mother would have been the one to sanction his brides and grant these young girls entry into the Rhea Palace. Sure, she didn't make him quote-unquote do it, but she had the power to stop him from having the reputation he was known for. She literally could have just let him paint. But you know, emperors had to have their heirs and whatnot. Now, just a bit of a disclaimer. It may seem like I'm inserting modern views into a historical and fictional setting, but even the story talks about this subject in a negative light. Anyway, back to the previous emperor. He never had any agency, which meant he never made independent decisions. However, there's one time where we see him make a very independent choice. He had gotten a servant girl pregnant, but the empress regnant wouldn't acknowledge the baby as her granddaughter. So a doctor was blamed and banished with the child, while the servant girl was trapped in the Rhea Palace for the rest of her life. Years later, he asked Shisho to marry her, so that she would at least have a good life. And he also bestowed a gift, a hairpin that would forever identify her as being from the imperial lineage. So yes, he was a flawed, weak, and perverted man. But I like that we get to see him try to take some accountability, and even try to ensure that his own daughter is taken care of in his own way. The difference between the two emperors didn't start with them, but with how they were raised. Where the Empress Regnant was controlling, Lady Anshi was a guide pointing the current emperor in a new direction. Lady Anshi came to the Rhea Palace and had the emperor when she was fairly young, and that undoubtedly came with a lot of trauma. However, she seems to have avoided projecting that trauma onto her son. From the look of things, she seems to have guided him while giving him the space and freedom to rule as he saw fit. While we don't get to see how she raised the emperor, we notice other things like how she's friendly and trustworthy when it comes to the consorts, and she's a doting grandma, which speaks to her character. As a victim of the many horrors that takes place in the Rhea Palace, we see her determined to make it a better place. She becomes instrumental in a lot of changes, including playing a part in the banning of the practice of making of eunuchs and also the opening of the clinic in the Rhea Palace. Is the Empress Dowager perfect? Not by a long shot. What she did to the previous emperor is proof of this. But it's still commendable that she is trying to be better than her predecessors. Her compassion is what truly makes her the mother of the nation. The current emperor is constantly trying to move away from his father's legacy and make his own. We see this in how he navigates relationships. As a father, he takes a very active role. I haven't read the light novels, but even from the series, you see how he was right by Aduo's side after she had her baby, and we see how tender he is with Princess Lingli. Both emperors are similar in that they both have harems, but the difference is in their treatment of the concubines. The previous emperor treated them like they were a means to an end. They were used in their youth and discarded in their maturity, forever trapped in the place that traumatized them. The current emperor, on the other hand, only chooses concubines that are of age and treats them with respect. He seems to try to build genuine connections with the concubines, visiting and conversing with them, like when we see him with Li Hua after the whole Xin ordeal. Also, when he asks that Mao Mao treat Li Hua, he asked Gu Qiu first, as a show of respect to her authority as Mao Mao's mistress. He could have made a demand, but instead he chose to make a request. Sure, it was protocol for him to ask, but he didn't have to, and he definitely didn't need to do it in person. Another unique aspect of the current emperor is that the concubines may leave the rear palace if he's never visited them. This gives them a chance to go back to their families and potentially start a new life. In some cases where illness prevents them from leaving, they may be offered a life of comfort within the palace, like we see with Concubine Sun. In the episode where the emperor asks Mao Mao to treat Li Hua, in her inner monologue she says, "The will of the emperor is the will of the heavens." I always wondered if the trip to the shrine of choosing was the emperor's way of trying to confirm that his rule was the will of the heavens. I know at the time in the empire, the shrine wasn't really deemed important, since for the past 2 generations, there was only one heir to inherit the throne, making the trip to the shrine an unnecessary one. And I get that the emperor might have come just for the sake of completing a fun puzzle, but we learn that it's his second visit. I think it's the fact that he was met with the words, "child of royalty, yet not child of the mother royal," that may have triggered him. When a role falls on you by default, it's only natural to question whether or not you're fit for it, and I think this was the emperor's dilemma. And I think it was more than a question of worth too. I think he was trying to confirm whether he belonged on the throne by the standards of the nation's founding story. Why is this important? This is a man trying his hardest not to be like his father. I think he's looking for a little nudge that the heavens are smiling on him, that they approve of him. So to be met with those same words a second time must have been devastating. It's only natural that he wanted answers, which the shrine keeper wouldn't really divulge anyway. Thankfully, Mao Mao solves the mystery, and he learns that what he thought was divine was nothing more than a genetic defect. The emperor didn't just inherit a throne, but also his father's failures. He didn't just choose not to be like his father, he chose to be compassionate and present. He strived to be worthy of his role, even when he was unsure the heavens willed it. And I think that's what makes him a compelling ruler. If you enjoyed this analysis, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Feel free to binge on the playlist for more deep dives into the world of the Apothecary Diaries. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!